Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Wow, the outside people's party is it's one, well, now two. Okay, we're growing. We're growing in strength in the outside people's party. Om Jnana Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Shri Gurave Namaha. Welcome back, everyone. We're reading from Light of the Bhāgavata, and we're taking up where we left off last time at the frog. So this will be text number 6. On hearing the sound of the torrential rains, the frogs come out of the mountain caves and begin to chant, like brahmacharis who chant the Vedic hymns by the order of the spiritual master. In this age of godless civilization, the sages of world-recognized religious sects who believe in God must come out of their secluded places and preach the science of God, the supreme will, to the people in general. Hindus, Muslims, Christians, and the members of the other sects that have convincing faith in the authority of God must not sit idly now and silently watch the rapid growth of a godless civilization. There is the supreme will of God, and no nation or society can live in peace and prosperity without acceptance of this vital truth. The warning is already there, and the responsible leaders of religious sects must meet together and form a common platform of a league of devotees of the Lord. There is no need for self-realized souls to live in a secluded place. Perfect self-realized souls engaged in the service of the Lord are engaged in the service of the Lord are unafraid of Maya, just as law-abiding citizens of the state never fear the police. Such fearless devotees of God always speak scientifically about the existence of God, even at the risk of death. Such devotees of God feel compassion for the mass of people who have completely forgotten the Supreme Lord and who engage in the false pursuit of happiness that ends in the sense pleasures enjoyed by the hogs and dogs. Seven. The small rivulets that almost dried up during the months of May and June now begin. The small rivulets that almost dried up during the months of May and June now begin to overflow their banks. Like upstarts that suddenly overflow the limits of expenditure. One should learn gravity from the sea and the rivulet. The sea is always within its limits, in spite of the many rivers pouring water into it. Similarly, one should properly use the assets of life and not squander them for purposes that have no permanent value. Uncontrolled, sensuous persons play with the assets of the body and accumulate wealth. But the strength of the body should be used for self-realization, not for sense gratification. Human beings have two kinds of temperament. Some are introspective and the others are extravagant. Those who are extravagant are enamored of the external features of phenomenal beauty and have no insight into the whole manifestation. They are practically asleep to introspection, and thus they are unable to derive any permanent value from the assets of the human form of body. But one who has developed introspection is as grave as the sea, while those who are extravagant are calm and quiet in sleep. Such grave persons use the full advantage of the human form of life. Although the animal propensities of the body should be minimized, those who are extravagant temporarily overflow in material enjoyment. Nonetheless, as soon as the rainy season of life is over, they become as dry riverbeds. Life is meant for the right cause, or sat, that which exists for all time. In the material world, nothing is sat, or eternal, but the bad bargain of the material world can be used for the best purpose. The mind dedicated to extravagance is a bad bargain, but one can make the best use of the mind by introspection. Hare Krishna. Text number 8. The colorful greenery of the newly grown grass, the seasonal flowers, the frogs' umbrellas, the butterflies, and the other variegatedness of the rainy season perfectly represent a well-to-do family absorbed in vanity over their personal assets. A rich man displays his opulence in various colorful ways. He has a good residential bungalow with sufficient property and a well-trimmed garden. The bungalow is decorated with up-to-date furniture and carpets. There are motor cars with dazzling polish and a radio set receiving and broadcasting colorful news and melodious songs. All these captivate their proprietor as though he were in a dreamland of his own creation. When the same man was as dry as fallow land and had none of these opulences, he was plain in behavior. But since obtaining all these material means of enjoyment, he has forgotten the principle that everything in the world comes and goes away like the changing seasons. The beautiful red fort and the Taj Mahal were built by Shah Jahan, who left the place long ago, and many others have also come and gone in the same place, like seasonal flowers. Material assets are like seasonal flowers only. Either the flowers wither or the gardener himself leaves. This is the law of nature. Therefore, if we want permanent life, knowledge, and bliss, we must seek them somewhere else, not in the changeable, temporary rainy season, which is flooded with so many varieties of pleasing sights that vanish when the season ends. Material manifestations of things are but shadowy representations of reality. They are compared to mirages in the desert. In the desert there is no water, but the foolish deer runs after illusory water in the desert to quench his thirsty heart. Water is not unreal, but the place where we seek it is misleading. The advancement of materialistic civilization is just like a mirage in the desert. The deer runs after water in the desert with full speed, and the illusion of water moves ahead at the same speed as the foolish deer. Water is not false, but we must not seek it in the desert. A living entity by his past experience remembers the real happiness of his original spiritual existence. But since he has forgotten himself, he seeks spiritual or permanent happiness in matter, although this is impossible to achieve. Number 9. A picturesque scene of green paddy fields enlivens the heart of the poor agriculturalist, but it brings gloom to the face of the capitalist who lives by exploiting the poor farmers. With good rains, the farmer's business in agriculture flourishes. Agriculture is the noblest profession. It makes society happy, wealthy, healthy, honest, and spiritually advanced for a better life after death. The Vaishya community, or the mercantile class of men, take to this profession. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Vaishyas are described as the natural agriculturalists, the protectors of cows, and the general traders. When Lord Sri Krishna incarnated himself at Vrindavan, he took pleasure in becoming a beloved son of such a Vaishya family. Nanda Maharaj was a big protector of cows, and Lord Sri Krishna, as the most beloved son of Nanda Maharaj, used to tend his father's animals in the neighboring forest. By his personal example, Lord Krishna wanted to teach us the value of protecting cows. Nanda Maharaj is said to have possessed 900,000 cows, and at the same time, of Lord Krishna about 5,000 years ago, the tract of land known as Vrindavan was flooded with milk and butter. Therefore, God's gifted professions for mankind are agriculture and cow protection. Trade is meant only for transporting surplus produce to places where the produce is scanty. But when traders become too greedy and materialistic, they take to large-scale commerce and industry and allure the poor agriculturalists to unsanitary industrial towns with the false hope of earning more money. The industrialists and the capitalists do not want the farmer to remain at home satisfied with his agricultural produce. When the farmers are satisfied by a luxuriant growth of food grains, the capitalist becomes gloomy at heart. But the real fact is that humanity must depend on agriculture and subsist on agricultural produce. No one can produce rice and wheat in big iron factories. The industrialist goes to the villagers to purchase the food grains he is unable to produce in his factory. The poor agriculturalist takes advances from the capitalist and sells his produce at a lower price. Hence, when food grains are produced abundantly, the farmers become financially stronger, and thus the capitalist becomes morose at being unable to exploit them. 10. Just as a living being attains a transcendently attractive form by rendering service to Lord Hari, similarly, all the inhabitants of the land and water have assumed beautiful forms by taking advantage of the newly fallen water. We have practical experience of this with our students in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Before becoming students, they were dirty looking, although they had naturally beautiful personal features. But due to having no information of Krishna consciousness, they appeared very dirty and wretched. Since they have taken to Krishna consciousness, their health has improved, and by following the rules and regulations, their bodily luster has increased. When they are dressed with saffron-colored cloth, with tilak on their foreheads and beads in their hands and on their necks, they look exactly as if they come directly from Vaikuntha. The residents of the water are the fish, frogs, and so on, and the residents of the land are the cows, deer, and so on. By constantly drinking and taking bath in the fresh rainwater of the rainy season, the tired and parched animals are refreshed, and their complexion becomes brilliant as their health is invigorated by the arrival of new rainwater. The lakes, ponds, and rivers are cleansed and invigorated by the downpour of new rainwater and thus become most beautiful. Similarly, a devotee of the Supreme Lord who takes advantage of the beautiful and invigorating downpour of the transcendental descriptions of God found in Vedic literature finds his spiritual consciousness invigorated and refreshed. In this way, his spiritualized body becomes very beautiful. 11. In the rainy season, when the rivers swell and rush to the ocean, and as the wind blows the waves about, the ocean appears to be agitated. Similarly, if a person engaged in the mystic yoga process is not very advanced in spiritual life, he can be affected by the modes of nature and thus will be agitated by the sex impulse. A person fixed in spiritual knowledge will not be attracted by the allurement of material nature in the form of beautiful women and the sex pleasure enjoyed in their association. One, however, who is still immature in the cultivation of spiritual knowledge may be attracted at any moment by the illusion of temporary happiness, just as the ocean is agitated by the rushing rivers and blowing wind which occur during the rainy season. It is therefore very important to fix oneself at the lotus feet of a bona fide spiritual master who is a representative of God, so that one will not be carried away by sex agitation. 12. The mountains, although being struck by torrents of rain during the rainy season, are not shaken, just as those whose hearts are dedicated to the transcendental personality of Godhead, are never disturbed even when they are harassed by great misfortune. Because a person who is spiritually advanced accepts any adverse condition of life as the mercy of the Lord, he is completely eligible to enter into the spiritual kingdom. Even though a person takes to the devotional service of the Supreme Lord, he may sometimes become diseased, impoverished, or disappointed by life's events. A true devotee of the Lord always considers these sufferings to be due to past sinful activities, and thus he is not disturbed, patiently awaiting the mercy of the Supreme Lord. Such devotees are compared to high mountains which are never agitated in any way, even when struck by powerful torrents of rain in the rainy season. Rather, they remain humble in spiritual enlightenment. Free of pride and envy, they easily gain the mercy of the Lord and go back home, back to Godhead. 13. In the rainy season, some of the roads are not frequently used and become covered with long grasses, on account of which it becomes very difficult to see the road. Similarly, in this age, the transcendental scriptures are not properly studied by the Brahmanas. Being covered by the effects of time, the scriptures are practically lost, and it becomes very difficult to understand or follow them. A covered road is exactly like a Brahmana who is not accustomed to studying and practicing the reformatory practices of Vedic injunctions. He becomes covered with the long grasses of illusion. In that condition, forgetful of his constitutional nature, he forgets his position of eternal servitorship to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By being deviated from the seasonal overgrowth of long grasses created by Maya, a person identifies himself with illusory productions of nature and succumbs to illusion, forgetting his spiritual life. 14. The lightning becomes unsteady in its friendship. The lightning becomes unsteady in its friendship, failing to remain faithfully in any one of the clouds. Although they are the friends of the entire world, just as lusty women do not remain steady even in the company of men who possess excellent qualities. During the rainy season, lightning appears in one group of clouds and then immediately in another group of clouds. This phenomena is compared to a lusty woman who does not fix her mind on one man. A cloud is compared to a qualified person because it pours rains and gives sustenance to many people. A man who is qualified similarly gives sustenance to many living creatures, such as family members or many workers in business. Unfortunately, his whole life can be disturbed by a wife who divorces him. When the husband is disturbed, the whole family is ruined. The children are dispersed, or the business is closed, and everything is affected. It is therefore recommended that a woman desiring to advance in Krishna consciousness peacefully live with a husband, and that the couple not separate under any condition. The husband and wife should control sex indulgence and concentrate their minds on Krishna consciousness so that their life may be successful. After all, in the material world, a man requires a woman and a woman requires a man. When they are combined, they should live peacefully in Krishna consciousness and should not be restless like the lightning flashing from one group of clouds to another. You could get a kurta like that in Loy Bazaar. 15. In the midst of the thunder in the cloudy sky, there appears a rainbow that has no string. Its appearance is compared to the appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his servants in the midst of the material atmosphere. The Sanskrit word guna means quality or mode, as well as string or rope. When a rainbow appears during the rainy season, it is observed to be like a bow and no guna or string. Oh. The Sanskrit word guna means quality or mode, as well as string or rope. When a rainbow appears during the rainy season, it is observed to be like a bow with with no guna or string. This is not up to date yet. Similarly, the appearance of the personality of Godhead or his transcendental servants has nothing to do with the qualitative modes of material nature. The phenomenal appearance of the transcendence is free from the qualities of material nature, and thus it resembles a bow with no string. The transcendental Supreme Lord is eternally the form of transcendental existence, knowledge, and bliss. The material energy works under his good will, and therefore he is never affected by the modes of material nature. When he appears before us in the midst of material interactions, he remains always unaffected, like a stringless rainbow. By his inconceivable energy, the Supreme Lord can appear and disappear like a rainbow, which appears and disappears without being affected by the roaring thunder and the cloudy sky. The Lord is eternally the biggest of the big and the smallest of the small. The living entities who are his parts and parcels are the smallest of the small, and he is the biggest of the big as the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. 16. At night, by the grace of the moonlight, the clouds in the sky can be seen moving. Yet the moon itself appears to be moving, just as a living being appears to be moving because of false identification with matter. At night, in the rainy season, the moving clouds reflecting the moonlight make the moon appear to be moving. This is called illusion. The spirit soul or the living being is the root of all the activities of the material body, but because of illusion, the spirit soul remains covered by the gross and subtle material bodies. Thus covered, the conditioned soul identifies with the material body and thus becomes subject to the sense of false ego. This false ego obliges the living being to consider his material body to be his self, the offspring of the body to be his children, and the land of the birth of the body to be the object of worship. Thus the living being's conception of nationalism is another type of ignorance. Because of ignorance, a living being identifies himself with the land of his birth and moves with the misconceptions of national ideas. In fact, however, a living being does not belong to any nation or species of life. He has nothing to do with the body, as the moon has nothing to do with the moving clouds. The moon is far away from the clouds and is fixed in its own orbit, but illusion presents a scene in which the moon appears to be moving. A living being should not float with the misconception of the temporary body. He must always know himself to be transcendental to the bodily identity. This is the path of knowledge, and complete knowledge fixes the living being in the orbit of spiritual activities. The spiritual living force is always active by nature. By illusion, his activities are wrongly directed in relation with the body, but in the liberated condition of complete knowledge, his activities are conducted in spiritual devotion. Liberation does not mean stopping activities. It means being purified of illusory activities and becoming transcendental to relations with the gross and subtle bodies. And now we'll take some reflections and questions and look what we've come to. It's the subject on the cover. Yes, let's see, who do we have? We have Krishna Saka, we have Yadutama. And looking in the outside people's party. So, go ahead.
I like the verse where it said that during the rainy season, the road becomes covered by the grasses. Similarly, in Kali Yuga, the authorized literatures, authorized scriptures, or authorized way of dharma or religious ways becomes covered. But I was being very grateful that our acharyas have kept walking on the path, so it never became covered. And even in Kali Yuga, I was remembering Radhika Raman Prabhu's point where he says like why Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam are always remained preserved because of the acharyas writing continuous commentaries on them. So it never changed. Like Bhagavad Gita never changed, and second most commentary was on Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam, that they wrote so many commentaries, so it never changed. And That was one point I liked. And one question I had was, in the one of the verses it is said that our our students of International Society for Krishna Consciousness, after coming to the organization, they are looking very clean or beautiful. But this book was written before, right? When Srila Prabhupada wanted to go to Japan. So,
Oh, that's a good point. Don't know. Research.
It seems it's taken from Krishna.
Oh.
I mean, that's what I was also thinking. He wrote it in 61, so there cannot be example of something given after 7 years.
Yeah, it requires a little looking into how this book was compiled. Maybe there was some sections that were inserted later from Prabhupada's Krishna book. Thank you. Yudutama.
Hare Krishna. I was just reflecting on how usually when you read this kind of literature that's based in nature, kind of reflections on nature, you kind of have this serene, pastoral, idyllic view in how we should be more like nature, right? But Prabhupada is using both metaphors, both as negative metaphors and positive metaphors. And I was just thinking of someone, who becomes interested and starts reading this book, how much of a stark contrast Prabhupada, uses. It's like almost an antithesis of nature literature, of like the transcendentalists like Emerson and Thoreau, and how that it's almost startling in a way, but you can't argue with his the solid logic of comparing the rivulets that are overflowing because of extravagance, and then the ocean is always never overflowing, and it's just so nice. Prabhupada using just so poetic and non-compromising to the message that he's trying to bring people, that we're not the body, we're transcendent of this nature, everything's temporary here. If the gardener leaves, then things decay and become chaotic, so to speak. Yeah, just so nice.
Yeah, thanks for your point about taking positive and negative from the lessons of nature and not the cliche of it's all good. Okay, Sudhira.
I like this statement when it says, even though a person takes to the devotional service of the Supreme Lord, he may sometimes become diseased, impoverished, or disappointed by life's events. A true devotee of the Lord always considers these sufferings to be due to past sinful activities, and thus without becoming disturbed, he patiently awaits the mercy of the Supreme Lord in the mood of 10:14.8 Srimad Bhagavatam. I would like to know more, Guru Maharaj, from you how to develop this mood, because if someone is diseased or impoverished or disappointed by life's events, so how to develop this?
Well, one thing is to live long or longer, because oftentimes we see even in people who aren't Krishna conscious, they develop a kind of wisdom over time that things are never as good as they seem or as bad as they seem. Because if you stick with your duty, sometimes what you have to do anyway, and you just go on with your life, then you notice that what you thought was really bad turns out to be okay. And you start noticing that sort of way that there's an otherworldly sense in which things are being taken care of. And that is a kind of intelligence about, or noticing the all-pervading intelligence that's in the universe that tends to make things work out. And for those who are devotees, who then are given the full opportunity to cultivate that whenever whatever situation may arise. There's a way in which Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would preface what he said with Krishna willing we are going to such and such a place today, Krishna willing. When we frame everything in that, with the idea that it's up to Krishna, even preemptively, not waiting, like, I have my plan, it didn't work out, must be Krishna's arrangement, but I'm going to try to execute Krishna's will. If he's willing, then it may come to pass. If it doesn't, he must have some merciful plan for me. And sticking close to that, not just at the end when the result comes or doesn't come, but even while setting out to do something, we are helped. We help ourselves by setting our sankalpa that I'm doing this to please the Lord. That can be very helpful. And then, studying the Bhāgavatam, because throughout the Bhāgavatam we have examples, for instance, of Chitraketu. I can't think of a more agonizing situation than Chitraketu and his wife went through, that they had focused all their energy on having a child. They didn't even care for their kingdom anymore. And everything in their lives was dependent on whether or not they could have a child. And then when they got the benediction that they could have a child, and then they did, but then the child died soon afterwards in a dastardly way, that he was poisoned by envious co-wives. I'm always struck by the scene that ensues after that, where he's wailing with a wide open mouth. If you've ever been in so much pain or in so much agony that you cry with your mouth wide open, that's pretty heavy. And he also couldn't keep consciousness. And he fainted and then came back to consciousness and realized what had happened and fainted again, which left him open for a teachable moment when, was it Narada and Parvat came back, and then they induced the jiva to come back in the body. And he said, "Hey, how come you left your father and mother?" And he said, "Sorry, Mac, I don't know who these people." I mean, no offense or anything, but I don't know who you guys are. And it was such a revelation to him. And then he went on to become a pure devotee, and still had more to go through after he had achieved perfection, almost, and then had that altercation with Parvati, who cursed him. And then as Vritrasura. I mean, hearing those stories play out and seeing how Krishna's hand was in everything and how it all worked out gives us some ways to consider our own life situation and how things are going. Who can imagine anything worse, as I said in the beginning, and then apply it to your own life and then say, okay, well, how do I take advantage of this situation? Where's Krishna's mercy in it? Which is really the question to ask. Tatenu kampam. There's an expectation. Krishna's got something in mind here for me. And then waking up from the dream that this is worthy of agony, agonizing over, and seeing that actually I'm still the same spirit soul, just extreme circumstances unfolding in my life. And think in the life of a devotee anyway, because there are natural disappointments and changes that take place. As I've counseled many devotees since I lost both my parents, lost in fact, they died. And then just knowing what it feels like and how that comes out to be a plus in so many ways. Even if your parents are really good to you, or especially if they are, there's an unfoldment in one's life if you maintain the Atma-Rama conception and go on noticing how things are unfolding. So what we call the practice of Krishna consciousness. It's a real life practice that includes, especially, it's not just breathing exercises, but it's encountering life's most challenging situations and then looking for Krishna's mercy in it all and what the lesson is in it, obviously, as well. Another point? Samyaprash? I'm looking to the outside world, and we have both Charan Aravinda and his better half. Whoever goes first. Okay, you go ahead too first, because we're trying to build up the outside people's party.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
I really like the similarity Prabhupada draws between the moon and the living entity. And he says that the moving clouds reflect the moonlight and make the moon appear to be moving, but the moon is always fixed in orbit. And then he said if the devotee just gains complete knowledge, he fixes himself in the orbit of spiritual activities.
Yeah, I love that one too. Thanks for reminding us. Vaishnavi?
I was thinking about plate 6 where it says, talks about the frogs on hearing the sound of torrential rain. They act like brahmacharis. They start chanting like brahmacharis who chant the Vedic hymns by the order of the spiritual master. And in the purport, Prabhupada mentions the warning is already there, and responsible leaders of religious sects must meet together and form a common platform of league of devotees of the Lord. There is no need for self-realized souls to live in a secluded place. And my husband and I went to Radhakund today, and we were just reflecting how there's such qualified devotees like yourself and Indadumna Swami, Sachinandan Swami, Purijam Prabhu, that you are all qualified to stay in Radhakund and just do bhajan, but you, because of your deep gratitude for Srila Prabhupada, your spiritual master, you are traveling and taking on the great austerity and sometimes hardships of traveling around and distributing this knowledge and the books. And where Prabhupada says to form a league of devotees, you're showing us by your example of how we need to stay in the association of devotees, and we should never think ourselves qualified to do anything independently.
Well, thank you so much, Vaishnavi, for those encouraging words. Yesterday, when we were at the memorial service, when all the God siblings were sitting together, I had, as I often do when we're in an assembly, especially nowadays, that all of us from that generation are oldish. There is that sense of unity and appreciation for the fact that we have a sense of solidarity. And thanks for bringing that point out, how important it is to have a league of devotees. It's really helpful. Okay, we got Samyaprash, then Kolavecha, then we have Mahendra Prabhu.
I was also appreciating that purport about the League of Devotees. I really felt Srila Prabhupada's strong sense of mission there, because he's such an advanced devotee. He's such an understander of the essence, such a Sauragrahi Vaishnava. He understands that actually, I mean, as he puts it, the sages, first of all, he calls them sages. The sages of world-recognized religious sects who believe in God must come out of their secluded places and preach. So he sees that there's a common mission there, and calls it a League of Devotees. We know there was a historical attempt at a League of Devotees. This is Srila Prabhupada's, vision of a non-sectarian Harinam Sankirtan movement. Broader than just those who are exclusively dedicated to the service of Lord Chaitanya and cultivating Raganuga Bhakti to serve Radha and Krishna. As glorious as that is, he also was very interested in getting everybody together who believes in God to combat the ignorance of those who are just obsessed with materialism. And I really appreciated, again, his mission-mindedness when he says, there's no need for self-realized souls to live in a secluded place. Perfect self-realized souls engaged in the service of the Lord are unafraid of Maya, just as law-abiding citizens of a state of never fear the police. And he qualifies it. What does he mean by Maya? He says, such fearless devotees of God always speak scientifically about the existence of God, even at the risk of death. So I took that we shouldn't be afraid of pushing forward the movement, because it's the sharing of Krishna consciousness, talking about God, even at, he says, the risk of death, is always a safe place to be. You know, kind of harmonizing this statement with other places where he says to be afraid of Maya. You know, we should be afraid of becoming degraded, but that shouldn't stop us, in other words, from sharing Krishna consciousness, because we can see that Srila Prabhupada had so much faith in Mahaprabhu's instruction that we have to push this on. This is what he wants. So Prabhupada, what to speak of talking to Vaishnavas, Gaudiya Vaishnavas, he's willing to knock on anybody's door and say, oh, you're a believer in God, please come and join me. Let's work together. I just thought that was such an example of Mahabhagavat vision and so much faith in Jadideko Tadika how Krishna Upadesh, just not even just spread Bhagavad Gita, but okay, if you're a believer in God, how does he put it? He says, those who have convincing faith. If your faith is such that it's powerful enough to convince others, you should be going out and making it a topic for people to see. Oh, this person has faith in God. Let them be moved by that. What vision?
Well, the Jehovah's Witnesses go out. Whenever I see them, I always appreciate them, because, I mean, I tell them directly, you're the ones who opened up door to door. It was illegal before them. They brought a lawsuit in America and made it okay for any religious person to go knock on doors. Jehovah's Witness key. Okay, Kolavitya Sridhar. Nice point, Samya Prash.
Thank you. In the purport of the verse 7, Srila Prabhupada, very nice, he speaks, human beings have two kinds of temperament. Some are introspective and others are extravagant. Those who are extravagant are enamored of the external features of phenomenal beauty and have no insight into the whole manifestation. They are practically asleep to introspection, and thus they are unable to derive any permanent value from the assets of the human form of body. But one who has developed introspection is as grave as the sea, while those who are extravagant are calm and quiet in sleep. Such great person use the full advantage of the human form of life. So I just was reflecting about sometimes we as devotees, we become like too much influenced by the external things. So we maybe do not take proper care of our own internal reflection, introspection. So I just wanted to ask you if you can give us some light, some tips about this. Thank you.
This means how to increase one's own appreciation of, or solidify one's own internal realization? Is that what you were asking?
Yes.
By writing. Prabhupada emphasizes again and again. In fact, I have a compilation of quotes where Prabhupada encouraged his followers to write, not just write BTG articles, but there are places where he said, the Goswamis have written, the Acharyas have written, my disciples will also write books. And he said specifically there that when you have realizations and then you write them, then you're able to solidify those and make them very clear. It's what Prabhupada did himself. That's the result of it are all his books. And it's what all our acharyas have done, is to write. So that's a practical process, especially if you can write and publish it somewhere, meaning, well, Back to Godhead is still available. Narangi Devi Dāsa down in Tennessee just got a really nice article published in the Back to Godhead magazine. Turns out she's a really good writer. And I could tell she got the idea, she wrote the article, and it really solidified it for her. And Ramprad Maharaj once said, you can always tell somebody's written a book on something, because when they speak about the topic, it just comes, it's all lined up. It's right there in your head. So that's my recommendation. Mahendra.
On a topic which Sudhir Madhava Prabhu brought about this statement, Srila Prabhupada said that even devotees, they go through diseases and disappointments in life, but they are like mountain. And it may seem, especially from outside, that these pure devotees, they are really like mountain. Whatever happened, they actually don't feel anything, almost. But I remember the lecture by Srila Prabhupada, which impressed me, the way he put it. And he said, Krishna crushed me many times, and now I understand why after so many years. So it means Prabhupada was disturbed and couldn't understand. So in general, that realization that it's Krishna's some special care and there is a reason for that, it doesn't mean the devotee is not affected and doesn't feel anxiety and disappointments. But the difference is the really fixed devotees, they are unmoved at all in their practice. And my question to that is, when such times come and the mind is really weak, how to steady it so that it's not affected so much in terms of remembering Krishna and performing everything what we are supposed to do.
It's important to have a devotee association, and that's one of the main functions of community. There are many functions of community, but one of the main ones are to help the community members overcome these challenging times. Just being part of a community now for so many years. Actually, I wasn't very much part of any community for many years because I was always being sent somewhere else. And even when I got there, I wasn't part of the community. I was just embedded in the community. And being part of a community, I realize when there's a lot of people, there's a lot of births, there's a lot of deaths, there's old age, there's disease, and each one of them is a time when everyone has to pull together and be there for the person who's going through it. I mean, even right now, I can think of several people who are going through some really heavy things, health challenges, or their parents just passed away, whatever it may be. And I remember when Dilip Bai's, many years ago, when Dilip Bai, member of our community's father, passed away. And I remember coming into the hall where we were holding the funeral ceremony, and they had saved a place for me right next to him in the front row. As soon as I sat down, he just grabbed me and started weeping. And I was just thinking how we all need that. Somebody there just to commiserate and to be there for you, just something visceral. Happened to me when my father passed away. I was in that flat that I often stay in at the MVT. And Nirkula called me in the middle of the night and said, your father just passed. And then the next morning I was walking down the stairs and Dhruva Maharaj Das and his wife Samapriya used to stay in the apartment below me. And I was walking down the stairs and they looked at me. Samapriya said, what's wrong? What happened? He said, my father just passed away. I was a little dazed. And she just gave me a hug. She's like a Jewish mother. And then this Italian brahmachari was walking by and goes, what happened? And And she said, his father just passed away. Oh, he was genuinely moved. And we came over, and he goes, oh, your dear father, and he grabbed me too. And I suddenly felt better. That although, okay, he could have said, Prabhu, you're not your body. Or he wasn't your body, get over it, But that was implicit, but he understood that I was wounded subtly. And in the Bhāgavatam, the first canto, we find after Kurukshetra, Yudhishthira was disconsolate. And so many of the family members had came together for the last rites and funerals, and Krishna was there. He helped to perform the last rites. There has to be closure on these worldly events where somebody passes away, where it's something just unforeseen happens, some reversal of fortune, people lose something in their life, and the community members have to come together and have an observance that, okay, it happened, we all recognize it, we're all going to go through the same thing, and we're going to help you get through it also. So that's really important, to have community. That's part of being a Goshti Anandi, and dealing with those types of things. And then, of course, it's accompanied always by kirtan, and always by reading a Bhagavad Gita, which then everyone, it solidifies the realization of it, and after processing it, then everyone feels better than before. Om Tat Sat. Did we call in everybody who was callable? I think so. So let's take a Gauranga stretch. And since we're on a new schedule, I have no idea what's happening. Gauranga. We're still in the game, right? No one can stop us. May I go a little longer? We're up to 17. We may finish this by the end of Kartik. Or even by the end of today. Okay. 17. When the clouds appear in the sky, the peacock begins to dance in ecstasy as a sincere soul becomes overwhelmed with joy on the appearance of a saint at his house. The duty of sages and saints is to go from door to door and thus enlighten the householders in spiritual knowledge. Householder life is compared to a dark well. In a dark well, the frog cannot see the free light of the open sky. The dark well of the householder life kills the soul. One should therefore get out of it so that he may see the light of spiritual vision. Saints and sages mercifully try to uplift fallen souls from the dark well of householder life. An enlightened householder therefore takes pleasure in the appearance of such saints and sages at his house. The mind of the householder, who is conditioned, a conditioned soul, is always disturbed by the threefold miseries of material life. Everyone wants to be happy in his householder life, but the laws of nature do not allow one to become happy in material existence, which is like a spontaneous forest fire. In the age of Kali, as described before, people in general no longer take pleasure in the presence of saints and sages, nor are they interested in spiritual enlightenment. The saints and sages, however, take all risks to propagate the message of Godhead. Lord Jesus Christ, Thakur Haridas, Lord Nityananda Prabhu, and many other sages risked their life to propagate the message of Godhead. Self-realized saints and sages take such risks for the spiritual enlightenment of the people in general. They do not take vows of silence meant to win cheap glory from the ignorant masses, from the ignorant mass of people. God is satisfied only when his devotees take all sorts of risks to propagate his glories. God is satisfied only when his devotees take all sorts of risks to propagate his glories. Did you hear it?
Yes. One more time.
God is satisfied only when his devotees take all sorts of risks to propagate his glories. God is satisfied only when his devotees take all sorts of risks to propagate his glories. What? That's Prabhupada. Such devotees are unafraid of the difficult journey to cross the ocean of nations. They are always anxious for the welfare of the fallen souls, who are attached to the false enjoyment of materialistic life, in which they forget their eternal relation with God. It is the duty of the saints and sages to enlighten the fallen souls, and reciprocally, it is the duty of the householder to receive the saints and sages cordially. As a peacock dances in ecstasy at the presence of clouds in the sky, the fire of the threefold miseries experienced by materialistic men can be extinguished only by the cloud of mercy of the saints and sages who can pour down the water of transcendental messages to put an end to the miseries of the householders. Many plants and creepers that were almost dead during the months of April and May are now visible again in various forms, for they are nourished by their roots in the moist earth. These numberless plants and creepers resemble persons who dry up in severe penances for some material gain, but then achieve their objectives and become luxuriously fat, nourished by sense enjoyment. In Bhagavad Gita it is said that when the daytime of Brahma is over, the manifested creators of the universe all vanish, and after the end of Brahma's night, the creation is manifested again. Bhutva grama saivayam, bhutva praliyate, ratyagame vashaparta, pravavatyaragame. Again and again the day comes, and this host of beings is active, and again the night falls. O Partha, and they are helplessly dissolved. That's Bhagavad Gita 8:19. Thus the cosmic creation in its manifestation and non-manifestation resembles the creepers and plants that appear during the rainy season and gradually vanish when the season is over. Even when the plants and creepers are no longer to be seen, their seeds remain, and these dormant seeds fructify in contact with water. Similarly, the seed-like spiritual sparks who are dominated by desire to lord it over the material nature exist in a dormant state after the cosmic manifestation is annihilated. And when the cosmic manifestation reappears, all the silent living beings within the womb of material nature come out and engage in sense enjoyment, thereby growing luxuriously fat. To attain liberation, one must be completely purified of perverted forms of desire. A living being cannot snuff out desires, and to practice artificially erasing the actions of desire is more dangerous than the active desires themselves. A living being cannot snuff out desires, and to practice artificially erasing the actions of desire is more dangerous than the active desires themselves. All desires should be reformed and directed towards spiritual activities. Otherwise, these same desires will repeatedly manifest themselves in different varieties of material enjoyment, thus conditioning the living being perpetually in material bondage. 19. A crane stands on the edge of a pond that is always disturbed by the flowing water, mud and stones. The crane is like a householder who is disturbed in the shelter of his home, but who because of too much attachment does not want to change his position. The forgetful householder life of the conditioned soul is a soul-killing dark will. Sounds like the name of a metal band. This is the opinion of Sri Prahlad Maharaj, the celebrated devotee of the Lord. Too much attachment for hearth and home is never recommended by a self-realized soul. Therefore, the span of human life should be methodically divided. The first stage is called the brahmacharya ashrama, or the order of life in childhood, when the man-to-be is trained in the ultimate goal of life. The next stage is the grahastha ashrama, in which the man is trained to enter into the transcendence. Then comes the vanaprastha ashram, the preliminary stage of renounced life. The last stage recommended is the sannyas order, or the renounced order of life. In this way, one accepts a gradual process of spiritual activities for the ultimate goal of liberation. Unfortunately, for want of sufficient culture of the human spirit, which is the name of the conference he was writing for here, it was Culture of Human Spirit. Unfortunately, for want of sufficient culture of the human spirit, no one wants to give up the householder life, even though it is full of pinpricks and mud. And those who are too attached amidst the pinpricks of muddy household life are compared to the cranes that stand on the bank of the river for some sense enjoyment despite all the inconveniences there. We should always remember that the society, friendship, and love we are supposed to enjoy in family life are only shadowy representations of the real society, friendship, and love reciprocated in the kingdom of God. There is no reality in the conditioned life of material existence, but because of our ignorance, we are attached to the mirage. The idea of society, friendship, and love is not at all false, but the place where we search for it is false. We have to give up this false position and rise to the reality. That should be the aim of life, and that is the result of cultivating the human spirit. Unfortunately, for want of sufficient culture of this spirit, the materialistic man always sticks to this false place in spite of all its turmoils. It is said that a man should give up the order of householder life at the age of 50. But in this era of ignorance, even an old man wants to rejuvenate his bodily functions, put on artificial teeth, and make a pretense of youthful life, even on the verge of death. Crane-like politicians especially are too much attached to the false prestige of position and rank, and so they always seek re-election, even at the fag end of life. These are some of the symptoms of an uncultured life. It's a nature book. 20. Fierce torrents of rain break over the strands and the partition walls of the paddy field. These disturbances resemble those created by the seasonal opponents of the standard principles of the Vedas, who are influenced by the age of Kali. Originally, the path of self-realization was established by the standard direction of the Vedas. Srila Vyasadeva divided the original Veda into 4 divisions, namely Sama, Atharva, Rik, and Yajur. Then he divided the same Vedas into 18 Puranas, supplements, and the Mahabharata. And then again, the same author summarized them in the Vedanta Sutras. The purpose of all these Vedic literatures is to realize oneself to be a spiritual being eternally related with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the all-attractive form, Sri Krishna. But all these different Vedic literatures were systematically distorted by the onslaught of the age of Kali, as the walls of the paddy field and the strand of the river are distorted by the onslaught of heavy rains. The attacks of distortion are offered by atheistic philosophers who are connected only with eating, drinking, the attacks of distortion, is that wrong? The attacks of distortion are offered by atheistic philosophers who are concerned only with eating, drinking, being married. It says being married. What does it say there? Being merry. And enjoying, this must be like right when they finish the manuscript. These atheists are all against, but you can't change anything. These atheists are all against the revealed scriptures because such persons are intimately attached to sense pleasures and gross materialism. There are also others who do not believe in the eternity of life. Some of them propose that life is ultimately to be annihilated and that only the material energy is conserved. Others are less concerned with physical laws, but do not believe anything beyond their experience, and still others equate spirit and matter and declare the distinction between them to be illusory. There is no doubt that the Vedas stand as the most recognized books of knowledge from every angle of vision. But over the course of time, the Vedic path has been attacked by philosophers like Charvak, Buddha, Arhat, Kapila, the atheist, Patanjali, Shankara, Vaikaran, Jaimini, the Nayakas, the Vaiśeṣikas, the Sagunas, the Empiricists, the Pashupat Shaivas, the Saguna Saivas, the Brahmas, the Aryas, and many others. The list of non-Vedic speculators grows daily without restriction. The path of the Vedas does not accord with any principle devoid of an eternal relation with God, attainment of His devotional service, and the culmination in transcendental love for Him. I wonder how history might have been different if Prabhupada had gotten passage to Japan to present this. Would have been his foray into the West, going directly to Japan from Vrindavan to present this book. Yeah. It's the farthest west you can get. 21. The wind carries the clouds to different parts of the globe, and the clouds distribute rains to the satisfaction of the people in general, just as rich kings and merchants distribute their accumulated wealth, inspired by religious priests. That means something. Now everything we hear is going to be a metaphor. As already explained, the four divisions of society, namely the intelligent class of men, the brahmanas, the ruling class, the kshatriyas, the mercantile class, the vaishyas, and the laboring class, the shudras, are meant to achieve one goal in life, self-realization or cultivation of the human spirit. The intelligent class of men, the brahmanas, are to inspire the kshatriyas and vaishyas in performing sacrifices for spiritual cultivation, and thus the cooperation of the brahmins, kshatriyas, and vaishyas uplifts the people in general, or the ordinary laboring class of men. As soon as this cooperation between the four classes of men in society stops, and the basic principles of spiritual culture are neglected, the social structure of humanity becomes a second edition of animal life, based on the propensities of eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. It is the duty of the intelligent men to influence the members of the richer communities, the kshatriyas and vaishyas, to sacrifice for spiritual culture. Only in this way can the tension between the capitalists and the laborers be well mitigated. In this age of Kali, when a slight difference of opinion leads to quarrel, even to the extent of riots, it is the duty of the intelligent men, the brahmanas, to selflessly inspire the richer people to sacrifice for this purpose. It is suggested herewith that the men of the intelligent class should not themselves try to become kshatriyas or vaishyas, nor should they engage themselves in the occupations of the various other classes. Rather, the brahmanas should simply guide them in spiritual cultivation, just as the wind carries the clouds to other places to pour water. The wind itself does not take up the responsibility for pouring water. The most intelligent men in society are the saints and sages who have sacrificed everything for the service of spiritual culture. Their duty is to travel throughout human society and inspire its members to engage themselves in acts of spiritual culture by sacrificing their words, money, intelligence, and life. That should be the theme of human life in order to make it a complete success. A society with no taste for spiritual culture is a blazing fire, and everyone in that fire perpetually suffers the threefold miseries. As clouds pour water on a blazing fire in the forest and thus extinguish it. Is that what you have? The intelligent men who work as the spiritual masters of society pour water on the blazing fire of miseries by disseminating spiritual knowledge and inspiring the richer section of the society to help in the cause. Temples of worship, for example, are constructed by the rich, and these temples are meant to impart spiritual education to people in general. These periodic spiritual ceremonies are held for inspiration and not for exploitation. If there are flaws now because of the age of Kali, they should be rectified, but the institution must be saved. We'll take a short break. We'll be back here at 5 minutes after 5. See you then.